midway between the bright lights of London's buzzing theatreland and the sombre atmosphere of its Inns of Court, lies Great Queen Street, home since 1775 to the Grand Lodge of England. Way back in 1717, when the first Grand Lodge was held, it wasn't in Great Queen Street, but just over a mile away in St Paul's Churchyard at the Goose and Gridiron Tavern. But it soon proved too small, so in 1773, Grand Lodge bought 61 Great Queen Street for 3,000 guineas. The original site consisted of two houses, one behind the other, with a small courtyard in between. The rear building and the upper floors of the one at the front were used for Masonic business, but the ground floor front was rented out to Brother Luke Riley as the Freemasons' tavern and coffee house. There was a small garden at the rear, which was to be the site of the first hall. It was built by Thomas Sandby in 1776 at a cost of £3,000. A new hall, added in the 1860s, is now the Grand Hall of the Connaught Rooms. Today, this white-painted brickwork is all that remains of the exterior of the original building. The idea for the present building was proposed by the Duke of Connaught in 1919, but it took 8 years to buy up the surrounding land and find the right design. Architects were given details of the general requirements, but were left to incorporate these in their own designs. Many plans were submitted, one from as far away as Canada, but eventually the contract was awarded to Ashley and Winton Newman. Work began in 1927 and was completed in 1933. Complicated negotiations took place between the planning committee and the local council, resulting in the redesigning of the western approaches to allow a wide space leading up to the ceremonial entrance of the building, which can be seen over a quarter of a mile away in Covent Garden. The doors below the clock tower are only opened on ceremonial occasions, such as the quarterly communications of Grand Lodge, or when brethren are being honoured with promotion, such as London Grand Rank. At all other times, visitors use the main doors, situated at the front of the building. With the building being situated in the grimy heart of London for more than 60 years, planned maintenance is essential. This unusual view of the exterior lasted for 26 weeks and will probably not be seen again for nearly 75 years. During the 6-month period, 900 windows were replaced, the asphalt roof was relaid, and the stonework thoroughly washed, bringing the building back to near its 1933 pristine condition. The busiest place in the building is the entrance lobby. It's estimated that over 250,000 people pass over this floor every year. And they come for a number of reasons, one of which may be to visit Letchworth's shop, which is tucked away around the corner in what used to be the Grand Tiler's office. The shop sells all kinds of Grand Lodge publications, as well as a great many other Masonic gifts and souvenirs. It's staffed entirely by volunteers, and any profits go to the Grand Charity. It's also one of the few places in the country that you can buy a book of constitutions over the counter. Most of the visitors are members of the 1,000+ lodges that meet here. There are 23 permanent temples or lodge rooms in daily use, each one varying in style and design. Temple number 10 is situated just below the clock tower. The walls are rather unusual because they're made of pumice stone. If you strike one of these pillars, it remarks a hollow sound. They're part of the iron and steel framework used in the building's construction, then clad to disguise them. Another interesting feature is the lighting. Rays of amber light behind the master's chair beam upwards, representing the rising sun. The light behind the junior warden's chair is at its brightest, representing the sun at its meridian, while the ruddy glow behind the senior warden's chair reminds us of the setting sun. This temple is the only one, apart from the Grand Temple, to boast a pipe organ, although this one is operated electronically. It's been used on many occasions when choir and organ have joined together, such as at the consecration of a lodge or chapter, and it sounds great. Light is used to effect through the stained glass windows at the east and west ends in Lodge Room 17. The distinctive panelling and furniture of number 17 Lodge Room, as well as the white swan of Buckinghamshire behind the senior warden's chair, serve to remind us of the generous support and large donation that province made to the building fund. The paintings are the property of the Lodge of Antiquity number 2, one of the 4 original lodges. They're always given this room, and it seems fitting that the painting behind the master's chair is of Anthony Sayer, the first Grand Master. Lodge Room 23, although one of the smallest, is no way less significant. The master's chair that I'm sitting in, as well as the warden's chairs, are actually on loan from the Grand Master's Lodge number 1. Another feature of the room are the portraits adorning the walls, which depict Grand Secretaries, past and present. Amongst some of the most recent are Sir Philip Colville, Sir Sidney White, Sir James Stubbs, and Commander Michael Higham. This is the largest of the permanent temples, number 1. It was originally intended for Supreme Grand Chapter, but it soon became too small, so those meetings now take place upstairs in the Grand Temple. Although too small for Supreme Grand Chapter, the Lodge Room still seats 600. And to ensure that every brother can hear what's being said, a sound system has been installed to assist those with hearing difficulties. The portraits along these walls are some of the past Grand Masters, all resplendently dressed, except, that is, for this man here, Lord Peter. He was Grand Master from 1772 to 1776, and incidentally one of the few Catholics ever to hold that office. Now, unlike the others, apparently Lord Peter was never actually painted in his stately robes. That's why in this portrait he's just wearing his normal day clothes. Back in the lobby, other visitors would have been asking directions to a very different part of the building and have been directed down long, hardwood-lined corridors past the imposing statue of the Duke of Sussex, which formerly stood behind the master's chair in the previous Grand Temple, to various committee rooms where appeals and petitions are heard, and where some private lodges hold their general purpose meetings. All of these gatherings are overlooked by huge paintings in heavy gilt frames of prominent former brethren, looking sternly down on the modern-day proceedings. At the end of this corridor, the surroundings start to change. The panelling becomes richer. There are mosaics. And plaques dating back to the 1700s. Everything suggests that behind these doors is a room of some importance. And there is. The boardroom. Its atmosphere, with its polished mahogany and hushed air of expectancy, led a film company to choose it to stage a courtroom drama. And you can see why. Usually it's not a judge who sits in this chair, but the president of the Board of General Purposes. Incidentally, the occasional buzzing that you can hear in the room is from these vast halogen lights that, when they're switched on, can take anything up to 20 minutes to reach full brightness. Grammar teaches us the proper arrangement of words, enabling us to speak or read a language accurately. Rhetoric teaches us to speak fluently on any subject. With logic, we learn to guide our reason discretionally in the general knowledge of things. Arithmetic, the property of numbers as they are expressed by letters, figures, tables, and instruments. Geometry, the ability to form plans and designs through length, breadth, and thickness. Music, the art of forming concords so as to produce a delightful harmony. And astronomy, which enables the contemplative mind to soar aloft and contemplate the wisdom, power, and goodness of the Creator. The President receives advice and guidance from the members of the board. Recommendations made in this room and adopted by Grand Lodge could affect Freemasons throughout the world. The board may sit and work in regal splendor, but such is not the case for all the 100+ workers in the building. In this office, the cashier and his staff deal with all monies received and paid out by Grand Lodge and the Grand Charity during the year. In another office, staff deal with the day-to-day running of over 1,600 London lodges and nearly 700 chapters. The largest office houses the Records and Petitions Department, where most of the membership applications are stored on computers. Now, if you're a Master Mason and you've received your Grand Lodge certificate, like this one, then you may have wondered how the seal of Grand Lodge is attached. Well, here's the answer. And there we have it, the finished article, Audi Vidi Tate. Along this panelled corridor is the administrative heart of English Freemasonry, the Grand Secretary's office. Visitors are shown into this small, though impressive-looking waiting room before they're ushered into the main office. They may think they'll see the Grand Secretary just the other side of this door, but that's not the case. First, there is the office secretary. Then, at the other end of the room, his personal secretary. She acts rather like a private personal secretary in a ministry. From the paperwork on the small table, you can judge just how busy the Grand Secretary's position is. It seems very different from this 1930s photograph of the office. This is how the room looked in the old building, with the Grand Secretary sitting behind the same desk as today. Another piece of furniture which links all these scenes is the bookcase, bought in 1717 for just £11, 5 shillings. This is the General Inquiry Office. Now the doors are over 10 feet tall, and the ceiling is so high that it almost disappears into the gloomy depths. Considering that the building was only constructed in 1933, how tall did these architects think we were going to be? If you think the administrative offices are a bit of a rabbit warren, then there's something else to see. The layout of this basement area is so confusing that some members of staff don't even come down here for fear of getting lost. Now, where am I going? With over 1,000 lodges and chapters meeting in the building, storing their furniture is a constant problem. That's why rooms like these are absolutely crammed with lockers. There are so many of them that they're spilling out into the corridors. But not only that, new ones can be found in almost any room where there's available space. This is my one, by the way. To transport all the lodge possessions from here to the lodge rooms on the upper floors, a team of porters is required. Items are loaded onto trolleys and whisked away by lift, ready for the tilers to lay out the lodges. And, of course, it all has to be safely returned. As you can imagine, with a building of this size, there's a certain amount of wear and tear. That's why there's a fully equipped carpenter's shop and upholstery department. And believe it or not, this chair will end up being completely restored. Even in remote parts of the building, there are valuable furnishings to be cared for. Obviously, these chairs haven't quite made it into the system yet, but I'm sure they will eventually. Another support area is the engineering workshop, fully equipped to deal with almost any emergency. Electrical maintenance has its own department too. Not only do the electricians deal with the lighting and power within the building, they're also responsible for the in-house sound system installed in the Grand Temple and Number 1 Temple. They also operate the radio mics used by guest speakers during lectures or seminars. Obviously, with valuable equipment such as this, when the workshops are unattended, the doors are kept firmly locked. One door which certainly isn't locked is this one. The offices of the Quattro Coronati Correspondence Circle and home of the premier lodge of Masonic research. This worldwide organization has members in every country where Freemasonry exists, and its daily post bag brings hundreds of questions from the 4 corners of the earth. Also housed in this office is a small shop containing a wide variety of books for Freemasons, together with an extensive range of regalia and many other Masonic items of interest to brethren. Behind the scenes is a much larger international mail order service, providing a much-needed facility to the craft in general. There are racks and racks of lodge banners, some of which are very old and may be in need of repair. But down here in the depths of Grand Lodge, even that isn't a problem. Some years ago, a small department was established to deal with the maintenance of fabrics and soft furnishings in the building. The expertise of the women here incorporates embroidery and even working with fine gold and silver wire. This department has grown out of all proportion to its original beginnings. Not only can they repair and maintain banners and regalia, but on this very expensive computer-controlled embroidery machine, they can create new banners or copy existing ones. The designs are stored on disk, and should the original be destroyed, duplicates could be made at any time.
Thank you, Anna. It's worth remembering that any lodge that's having a banner made for the first time, the design must have been approved by the Grand Secretary's office first. Although most of the information used by the registration department is these days stored on computer, they still refer to the hundreds of thousands of documents kept down here in the vaults. Before the days of modern computerization, all of the membership records, dating back as far as the mid-1800s, were kept on cards in these files. But this is the Million File, which records the names of every Freemason who contributed £1 towards the cost of constructing this very building. Since the formation of Grand Lodge, one of its duties has been to receive petitions and then grant warrants to private lodges. Now, once the founders have submitted their petition and it's been processed, it's stored down here. And just reading through some of the names on the earliest petitions is like reading a page from Who's Who or Burke's Peerage. Also stored down here, in these extremely large and heavy volumes, are records of the contributions made to Grand Lodge dating back to the early 1800s. Now, if I can find my way out of here, I'll show you more.
The vaults are by no means the lowest level of the building. The sub-basement and below contain many surprising features. The initial design in the late 1920s incorporated a heating system, advanced for its time, but sadly by today's standards outmoded. The original system boasted the heavy cast iron construction much favoured in those days. And some of those items, as you can see, still remain. But the majority has been superseded by this modern, efficient, computerized plant.
At one time, this whole gallery was a buzzing control room with knobs, dials, throw switches, and all manner of other devices needed to run the equipment. Now all that's needed is a simple computer. A sign of the times. As you can appreciate, we're already fairly deep down towards the very bottom of the building, but we haven't quite got down to its lowest point. Follow me. At its construction, the building was remarkably ahead of its time, with several subterranean passages running underneath it. These passages are effectively wind tunnels for the heating and air conditioning systems, and in fact, these supporting pillars have actually been designed aerodynamically to minimize drag and allow the air to flow on its way through the building.
Huge fans draw the air in, pass it through filters and up via heat exchangers to the lodge rooms on the higher floors. The air is then drawn down again and extracted from under the seating and lower skirting boards.
Now you might expect a rather large fan like that to be kept downstairs in the basement, but in fact it's not. Where it is on the roof.
The clock tower is level with Lord Nelson, and incidentally Edward Hodges Bailey, who sculpted Lord Nelson, was also responsible for the Duke of Sussex statue in the corridor we saw earlier. Nelson looks out over the rooftops of London, past the Palace of Westminster and Big Ben, and on towards the city. Here, the dome of St. Paul's, struggling to be seen on the modern skyline, marks the spot alongside which was the Goose and Gridiron Tavern, where the first meeting of Grand Lodge took place in 1717. On the north side of the building, competing with ever taller office blocks, the Telecom Tower is still head and shoulders above the rest.
We came from the basement to the roof via the magic of television, but you'd have to use a slightly more conventional route, namely via the main staircase.
And this is the main staircase, which in part 2 we'll be looking at in more detail, as well as exploring the Grand Temple and the other rooms it leads to above. The main staircase, made of Botticino and Napoleon marble, rises through 3 floors, where its magnificence and splendour are reflected, even duplicated, in the blue and rose-tinted mirrors which adorn its half-landings and sides. Light on the windowed side is filtered through stained glass windows, like this one, which was presented by the Grand Lodge of New South Wales.
On the landings, lofty rooms bedecked with paintings of famous masons are in no short supply. Here in the refreshment room is a copy of possibly the only painting of George Washington wearing his Masonic regalia. Tucked away around the corner on one of the mezzanine floors are the offices of the London Grand Rank Association. They're not responsible for selecting brethren for London Grand Rank, but once a brother has received this honour, they offer membership to an association which provides information through regular meetings and a quarterly bulletin.
Along the upper corridors is a permanent exhibition on the history of English Freemasonry, in what was once the reading room. It was opened by the Grand Master, His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent, in 1986. Pride of place is given to the Sussex Plate, presented to the Duke of Sussex in 1838 to commemorate 25 years as Grand Master. The Grand Master's throne and warden's chairs date back to 1791, shortly after the election of the Prince of Wales as Grand Master in 1790. Extracts from the Grand Lodge minutes of February 1791 state that because of the Prince's social standing, the lodge should be furnished with more suitable chairs. A further extract informs us that 50 to 70 pounds should be set aside for the throne and 25 to 30 pounds for each of the warden's chairs. The throne has been used by Grand Masters right up until Edward, Duke of Kent, in 1967. This painting depicts a reception for the Prince of Wales on the 1st of December 1869 as past Grand Master. As you can see, the crown on the throne is missing. It's only affixed when a member of royalty occupies the Master's chair. With items like these, it isn't surprising that the exhibition attracts more than 30,000 visitors a year. Grand Lodge's library contains a comprehensive range of Masonic literature. Some of its books are over 200 years old. Among these is Anderson's first book of constitutions. One of the most prominent books on display contains the first recorded minutes of Grand Lodge. These were not kept until 1723, when William Cowper was appointed secretary to Grand Lodge, now called the Grand Secretary. The library has earned a reputation for making a valuable contribution towards the study of architectural history. Students from universities all over the world have researched here for their PhD or MA degrees. Using both books and the library's modern computer system, they have found the information necessary for their thesis. The librarians are also Masonic historians. They're always pleased to answer questions if they can, and if not, they can usually give good advice as to where the answer can be found. The gallery contains books from all over the world, some in foreign languages. They come from France, Germany, Australia, and America. This is an Oddfellows long-cased clock. They adopted Masonic symbols. Sir Winston Churchill was initiated into Studholme Lodge on the 2nd of May 1901. On the right is a copy of the summons for his raising in March 1902, when he would have been presented with this Master Mason's apron. This striking piece was presented, along with these other gifts, to Lord Farnham, the Pro-Grand Master, during a trip to India in 1994. Leading on from the library is the museum. Here, a wide range of regalia, jewels, china, porcelain and glassware are exhibited. This is the True Friendship Punch Bowl, originally owned by Lodge number 1797 in Calcutta, which is now Lodge 218 and meets in Gloucestershire, the bowl was made by Sing Chong of Canton and presented to Grand Lodge by Brother Hugh Adams in 1813. The most frequently requested exhibits are the Masonic ornaments and working tools made by the prisoners in prisoner of war camps. The ingenuity of those brethren in having crafted and disguised those implements which enabled them to hold meetings right under the noses of their captors has intrigued Masons for years. Working tools in German camps were made of wood taken from the bunks. These jewels, made by Brother Skipper, a prisoner of war in Changi jail, are from materials salvaged from a bombed bus and were used by the Prince of Wales Lodge number 1555, which met secretly in the camp. Masonic property in Jersey was destroyed by the Germans, so after the war, the province was given permission to meet without regalia. Some of the brethren made temporary aprons and badges from handkerchiefs. The pride of the museum is this painting by John Martin of Joshua commanding the sun to stand still. Some say his enthusiasm for the wide panoramic scene with its hundreds of characters was the inspiration for film directors such as Cecil B. DeMille and David Lean. This is a working museum, and that means that many of the items on display, including the items here, are still used today on ceremonial occasions. This is the Grand Registrar's bag, which was originally used to house the Articles of Union. Now, these are the Articles of Union, the document that was signed between the ancients and the moderns Grand Lodges in 1813 to signify their joining together to become the United Grand Lodge of England. Now, this is a very valuable and also a very fragile document, so it's not even on display, and it's certainly not carried anymore. Instead, it's kept safely locked in a vault. On the day of Grand Lodge communications, the ceremonial sword, as well as the bag, and also the standard, are taken into the Grand Officer's robing room, ready to be used for the ceremony. The aprons, collars and chains of the officers of Grand Lodge are stored on trays and kept safely locked away just outside the robing room. They're carefully laid out in their correct order on the morning of a Grand Lodge meeting. The head porter makes sure every detail of the regalia is correct and helps the officers don their heavy, gold-encrusted garments. There is no shortage of reminders here of the royal succession of Grand Masters who have presided over these proceedings. King Edward VII, King George VI, Prince George, Duke of Kent, and His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent. The Grand Master's presence in the robing room is in portrait only. He has his own private suite. This ormolu clock replaces the original Athos clock presented by the Swiss Grand Lodge Alpina. The timepiece, which worked perfectly well elsewhere, kept stopping when placed in here. The elegant mirror enables the Grand Tyler to assist the Grand Master with his regalia in the peace and quiet of his own robing room,
where he'll put on this magnificent apron, his chain, and also his collarette. And behind this door is the secret of the Grand Master's robing room. The room's original design incorporated a private staircase and entrance, but also this lift, which was built for the Duke of Connaught, but is never used today.
Past Grand Officers robe themselves. With so many attending the quarterly communications of Grand Lodge, space is sometimes at a premium. Past masters and wardens dress downstairs, and of course, each master or warden must have brought their lodge collar with them. If not, they'll not be allowed admission. When properly dressed, masters and wardens present themselves to a team of scrutineers who check the brother's name and rank against the lodge returns.
Have a good day, worshipful master. Thank you.
So a lodge secretary should ensure that a brother's name is not omitted from the register. When all have taken their seats in the Grand Temple, the Grand Officer procession is formed in the long Tasmanian lapwood-lined corridor. The sword bearer and standard bearers take post. And when the Grand Director of Ceremonies and his assistants are sure all is in order, the procession moves off. The procession is led by two Deputy Grand Directors of Ceremony and the Grand Tyler. Next come the Grand Stewards. Followed by the Acting Grand Officers of the Year, junior at the front, senior at the rear. All these officers are appointed on an annual basis. Behind them are the Provincial Grand Masters. Although equal in rank, The most recently appointed are at the front, with the longest serving members at the rear. Finally, there are the rulers of the craft. Preceded by the Grand Sword Bearer and flanked by the Grand Standard Bearers, on this occasion is the Pro Grand Master. When the Grand Master attends, his standard would be carried instead. When everyone is seated, the Grand Director of Ceremonies and his deputy enter the temple, and the doors are closed for the business of Grand Lodge to begin. On quieter occasions than those of courtly communications, one can fully take in the surroundings of the processional corridor and the beauty of its stained glass windows showing the four virtues: temperance, prudence, fortitude, and justice. There is also the Grand Master's coat of arms and the coat of arms of Grand Lodge, both encircled in a Grand Officer's chain. With no one about, there is a splendid view across the three anterooms into the main body of the temple. Stained glass windows leading up from the first vestibule show the 6 periods of creation. The windows on the left, showing the Doric column of strength, were presented by the London Rank Association, the former name for the London Grand Rank Association. The centre panel with the Ionic column of wisdom was a gift from the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. Whilst the Grand Lodge of Canada, province of Ontario, donated this Corinthian column of beauty. On the opposite side of the vestibule, all 3 panels were presented to Grand Lodge by the province of Monmouthshire. Here, the columns are replaced by Masonic signs, representing the Master and 2 wardens. When the sun is shining, the windows really do come to life. The main feature in the first vestibule is the memorial window and shrine. The theme of the window is peace through sacrifice, and the main feature is similar to the design of both the jewel for the Masonic Million Memorial Fund and the Hallstone jewel.
The shrine, with its 2 flanking columns of light, continues the theme of peace and eternal life.
The center of the ark shows the soul of man resting in the hands of his Creator. At the corners stand a pair of winged seraphim with golden trumpets. And across the front, the four figures portray Moses, the lawgiver, Joshua, the warrior, Solomon, the wise, and St. George of England.
The names of all those masons who made the supreme sacrifice in the 1914 to 1918 war can be seen through the aperture on the top of the shrine.
The aperture is guarded by four kneeling figures representing the fighting services.
But as the whole building was erected as the Masonic Peace Memorial, it's possibly the largest memorial in the world, and quite probably the only one in which people work on a regular basis. It was agreed from the outset that the fund for financing this building should be from voluntary contributions and not a levy. Accordingly, the Masonic Million Memorial Fund was launched, and all lodges were invited to subscribe an average of 10 guineas per member. Upon achieving this goal, the lodge was awarded with a Hallstone jewel and collarette to be worn by its master in perpetuity.
Names engraved on this wall show English lodges from all over the world who contributed to the scheme, which was a complete success. More than £1.33 million were raised, and the building was able to be handed over to the Board of General Purposes completely free of charge. Passing through the second vestibule, through the bronze openwork screens which were presented by the province of Yorkshire West Riding Division, past the scrutineers' checkpoints and the anteroom to the Grand Temple, we arrive at the Grand Temple itself.
The doors to the Grand Temple, surrounded with their portal of white statuary marble, are the most striking feature of the anteroom, but it is worth considering their surroundings.
The fine Botticino and Napoleon marble give it a marvellous 1920s look. It's a much sought-after venue for filmmakers, and several Agatha Christie plays, as well as some well-known commercials, have been shot here. The centre of the 12-pointed star is of semi-precious stone, lapis lazuli, and on the floor the architect has made a deliberate mistake. The building, similar to Persian carpets, was made imperfect in the sight of God. A gold square in the small pattern to the right of the doors has been wrongly positioned. The ceiling, though small, is beautiful. Although the centre light has been designed to be lowered for cleaning, the ceiling itself has never been cleaned since it was built. It contains more than 2,000 feet of pure gold, perhaps more than good reason why it has never been cleaned. The great bronze doors to the temple were presented by the Provincial Grand Lodge of Lancashire, to commemorate the 70th birthday of their Grand Master, the Earl of Derby. Designed by Walter Gilbert and cast at Cheltenham by Martin & Co., each door is over 12 feet high, 4 feet wide, and weighs 1¼ tons. The 8 panels on the exterior of the doors depict the building of King Solomon's Temple. From the bottom right, the metal workers casting their metals on the plains of Zerodatha. The giblights heaving the stone. Timber from Lebanon being brought by river to the port of Joppa. The giblights bringing the stone by road to Jerusalem. Fabric being woven by the sides of the great rivers. Gold and silver vessels being brought from beyond the great deserts. The 7-branch candlestick. The ark with prayers and thanksgivings to the house of the Lord. The doorposts are hollow bronze columns, decorated with ears of wheat and supporting the celestial and terrestrial spheres. In the center is the sacred symbol. The architraves and lintel thus symbolizing life, fruitfulness, and eternity.
Despite their vast weight and size, the doors are perfectly balanced and can be easily opened with just one finger. On entering the temple, if I just close the main door, one is immediately struck by the complete silence.
The temple is situated in the center of the complex, with a courtyard surrounding it on 3 sides. It's only joined to the main building at the entrance through which we've just passed. With no outer walls, even the noise of the hustle and bustle of the center of London cannot penetrate. 123 feet long, 90 feet wide, and 62 feet high, that's 37 by 27.5 by 19 meters, the temple seats just under 1,700. Apart from its obvious Masonic use, musicals, orchestral recitals and festivals have been staged here. They're often set in the round, in the middle of the floor, and with the excellent acoustics, artists have no difficulty being heard. But for the hard of hearing, a PA system has been installed in most of the temple, which is used during Grand Lodge proceedings. So, if a brother sits in the body of the temple, he'll hear everything clearly. One of the most beautiful features of the temple is the coving around the ceiling. It's about 16 feet or 4.5 meters high and is entirely mosaic. The largest stone is only about 1 inch square. Made by Italian craftsmen, it's said to be one of the finest examples of modern mosaic in the country. The wording describes the building of King Solomon's Temple. In the corners are the 4 cardinal virtues.
To put things into proportion, the center star weighs nearly a ton, and at its furthest points, it's slightly wider than the black and white flooring that I'm standing on.
For cleaning purposes, it's lowered to the floor on a cable, and as a precaution, the warden's chair is moved back to avoid accidents. The backdrop in the east is some rather splendid curtains in metal brocade. They were made on hand-operated looms and interwoven with yellow and white metal wire. In front of the curtains is the temple organ. It's a Willis III manual with 126 stops and 2,200 voices. It's similar to the great organ in Westminster Abbey. Willis organs are few and far between, and the only one said to have a greater range of voices is that in Wells Cathedral. Grand organists, however, say they preferred this one. You can judge for yourself. Whilst we examine the beautiful features of the Grand Temple in more detail, the music you'll hear throughout was played on this organ. The mosaic in the south depicts the all-seeing eye, with Helios, the Greek sun god, marking the sun at the meridian. In the west are the great mathematicians Euclid and Pythagoras. Euclid with his 47th proposition, which is the jewel of a past master. Situated in the north are the two grand columns supporting the celestial and terrestrial globes, pointing out Masonry Universal. They're covered in network for unity. In the centre is the coat of arms of the Duke of Connaught, Grand Master from 1901 to 1939. Also depicted, St. George slaying the dragon, signifying good overcoming evil. On the east side are Solomon and Hiram, king of Tyre. Between them is the Ark of the Covenant, with the volume of the Sacred Law. The symbols on Jacob's ladder are faith, hope, and charity, climbing to the sacred symbol represented by the Hebrew figure Yod. This entrance is surrounded by Alps jade, one of the hardest marbles known. The stained glass windows of the sun shining its benign influence on us are lit by daylight or lamps. Signs of the zodiac are here for nostalgic reasons, having been part of the design in the other two grand temples.
These steps between the Grand Master's chair and the temple organ can be opened up, and the area beneath is used to store a variety of Grand Lodge furniture.
Down here is the organ motor room, and even a small TV studio. All in all, it's an interesting place.
The three great chairs are made of hand-carved wood covered with gilt.
The Master's chair in the centre was presented by the province of Kent. The two smaller chairs were presented by the provinces of Surrey and Middlesex. The upholstery on the seats has seen over 60 years of wear, but the material on the backs is just as good as it was in 1933.
The interior of the doors illustrates the spiritual side of man's belief in the Creator. On either side are the great six-winged seraphs, the attendants on the Almighty.
They hide their faces with their wings to express an innate dread of the divine majesty of God. The one on the left was given the sun to rule the day, the other the moon to govern the night. Between the seraphs are the divine hands, representing the soul of man resting in the hands of the Creator, and the scales with which he will be judged. The starry girdle of purity divides the human from the divine, and the figures beneath symbolize the blessings bestowed on man from above.
The first figure holds a double-handed cross saw used for cutting wood and stone. He represents labor.
Next is a much more important character, wearing the headdress of a high priest. He is probably an overseer. He holds two Masonic symbols, the square and compasses. The compasses would have enabled him to work out the proportions of the building and give guidance to labor. More importantly, the compasses teach us to limit our desires in life. Therefore, he represents wisdom in counsel. The figure holding a dragon in one hand and plucking out its evil tongue with the other represents courage. He enjoins us to pluck out evil wherever we find it. Justice is a figure holding a sword and a set of scales, but in this instance it is a man, not a woman, and the figure is not blindfolded. He is clear-sighted and open-eyed, as justice used to be depicted in the 15th century. Not only is this figure looking in both directions, he also has a mirror to look over his shoulder. He is, of course, Prudence. One straw can be broken, but a tied bundle is much more difficult to break. Strength through unity is shown by this figure, Fidelity. This figure, in a posture of meditation in the temple, represents contemplation. Beauty is for Hiram Abiff, whose beautifying hand adorned King Solomon's temple with ornate carvings and precious metals. Wisdom is for the wisdom of King Solomon in building, completing, and dedicating the temple at Jerusalem to the honor and glory of the Almighty. A man pointing to heaven and holding an ear of wheat represents hope, reminding us we must all have hope in the future. Moses, with the tablets of the sacred law, represents temperancy. From the Old Testament, David and Jonathan, who showed one man's love for another, could transcend even this mortal existence. They represent one of the foundation stones of Freemasonry, brotherly love. The soldiers in the uniforms of the 1914 to 1918 war, who unselfishly gave their lives and to whom this building is dedicated, represent sacrifice. And finally, the figure with his finger to his lips, urging us to think before we speak, represents taciturnity. The handles on the doors are in the form of swords, not representing war, but peace, because their points are embedded, symbolizing they are finished. The sword on the right, with the two lions interlaced with the shaft, is the sword of courage. The one on the left, with the serpent entwined, is the sword of wisdom. Whilst in our temples we may draw strength from the teachings therein, we should always leave with wisdom. Film or video can never fully show the magnificence and splendor of the Grand Temple or its surroundings, and a personal visit is strongly recommended. The library and museum are open most weekdays, and guided tours are conducted hourly throughout the day. A special extended tour is available on Saturday mornings, but prior booking is required for that. Non-Masons and wives are all welcome, and many visitors from overseas have already taken advantage of the tour whilst in London. Of course, you won't see everything that we've covered in this video, but then, after all,
This is
the ultimate tour